From the Steel City, I bid you all good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. My name is Leah Prime, and this is the Invisible Night School. For those of you just joining us, the Invisible Night School is a small consortium of lay researchers and scholars pursuing the study and exploration of ufology, high strangeness, and the phenomena. INS is not a monolith. We represent varied ideas, backgrounds, disciplines, and experiences. And we seek to engage in good faith dialogue with other curious minds. Tonight, we are joined by Jay Shenk, a man who survives getting 2 art degrees, designer, advertising professional, and student of the strange. Oh man, I love that. I have to remember that. Jay is interested in applied psychology through art, psi phenomena, electronics, and of course, art. He can be found roaming at large in the greater Northeast Ohio area. Super excited to bring Jay onto the show this evening. I actually first connected with him through Nick over his sick memes, but this dude has an incredible wealth of knowledge on the paranormal, and all of us were super excited about this subject proposal of art and paranormal. So without any further delay, I'm going to welcome onto the stream my beloved co-hosts, Campbell, Nick, Lewis. Gentlemen, how are you? Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Yes, thank you. And let me get Jay in here too to join the conversation.
Oh, we lost.
I'm not lost. I was actually gonna curse StreamYard live on the air. It is the most straightforward possible platform to use, but it seems like something is always going sideways on it. Anyway, Jay, welcome to the Invisible Night School.
Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for having me. I'm really glad to be here, and I hope no one regrets it. I was just thinking though, as you read the roaming at large across northeastern Ohio, avoiding the toxic cloud, though, to the best of my ability. But we'll talk about that. We can talk about that later. So.
Well, we have several interesting things going on in the news right now. We've got those balloons getting shot down. We got toxic clouds. Since that's local to you, what's your take on that whole thing going on in Ohio? Because I haven't really read much about it.
It is bad, but it is not as bad as Twitter makes it seem. People on Twitter are talking about it being, it's like it's a Chernobyl level thing. It's the greatest environmental disaster. It's going to ruin everything. People are spreading rumors, that there's mass die-offs of animals within a 100-mile radius. And I'm well, I'm at 50 and still kicking. I mean, it's not good. And, I'm worried about the future because they're really we're not going to do anything to stop this from happening again. And fun, like the extra fun part of this. So there's an east-west, also like an east-west Norfolk Southern route where they haul this stuff. And there was a line that runs from, if you look at a map of Ohio, where Canton, Ohio is, which is south of Cleveland. If you go straight down and then out this way to the west, it runs through some smaller towns where they're going to close that line and route that stuff through greater Cleveland. So the next time there's a derailment with vinyl chloride and they're doing the controlled burn, it'll be in somebody's neighborhood in a major city instead of a village.
Do you think the railroad companies will pay them off a little more than $5 a person?
I think they're up to $1 million today for the whole town, but I don't know how I feel like it's $1 million, but you can't get it. One of those kind of deals. You can definitely get your $5.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's still cheaper than giving them paid time off or something, right?
It's well, that's the other aspect of this is I saw somebody from the Carmen's union speak, and the Carmen are the people that inspect the cars. Oddly enough, and the Carmen have been cut down. They used to do a 3-minute inspection per car. They cut those down to 90. That's like a huge issue with that. So this guy, just based on some security cam footage, is like, it looks like a bearing failed, and that's a common fail point. They fail. Who knows? Maybe that would have gotten fixed if they would have had more Carmen and they would have been allowed to do their 3-minute inspection, etc. But we'll. So I don't think this is not the apocalypse. It's not over for Ohio because of this. It's over for Ohio for a whole other series of reasons that we won't way outside the scope of this show. Eventually, we will all be consumed by Nega, Ohio. Our shadow,
nice,
the shadow realm that's attached to the state. But again, we'll talk about that some other time. So, not good, but not apocalyptic.
It's
Oh, go ahead, Leo.
Oh, I was just going to say, what's interesting is there's been a small handful of these derailments in the last week. There's this one in Ohio. There's one outside Houston, one in South Carolina. There was some kind of additional chemical spill outside Tucson. I don't think it was involving a train. And we have this also coming on the coattails of a long and arduous labor battle on behalf of the railroad workers who were requesting higher pay, paid benefits, paid sick time, basically all of the things that any other civilized country in the world offers their employees, especially the employees that, for instance, are transporting toxic chemicals across state lines and doing safety checks. We'd hope that we would want them to be happy, healthy, and in good working order. But, apparently not the case.
Into what I was going to ask, why do you, like Campbell mentioned, he hadn't really read much on this. Why do you think it's not getting the coverage that, in my opinion, it should?
I don't think it's getting the coverage it should because we just had that prolonged battle and everybody. I mean, it's illegal for railroad workers to strike if ordered back on the line. There's some law that was passed in the 30s or 40s about that. We're like everybody, and also like everybody got together. That was unanimous across party lines. Everybody's like, screw them, get them back to work. I think they got a day off. Maybe they had no days off. Now they have a day. You have a day off now, and I don't think anybody. This is one of those things where there's no political capital to be made on anybody's part on it. So nobody is going to try to bring it out in the news. Plus, we really have the really convenient, like, fun story of the balloon shoot down, and then
disclosure is happening. The aliens are here.
Disclosure. It's like it's disclosure yet again.
Nearly soon, right?
Well,
now.
We've seen a long. Oh, sorry. We've seen a long history in the UFO culture more broadly, interests in environmentalism, in paranormal culture in general as well. Do you have a interest in the environment, and is it linked in your mind in any way to your interest in the paranormal?
I do have an interest in the environment, but it's not really linked to an environmental like cause. I mean, I'm interested in the environment because, as far as I can tell, I'm existing in it.
Yeah, all your stuff is
the limit. Like all my stuff is there.
We may not all be materialists on this show, but I understand wanting to maintain a clean and safe immediate environment.
Right. And I think a lot of it, it doesn't tie in too much directly, but I do, because we do also have a very long legacy of environmental degradation in Ohio. I grew up, I mean, I never got powers. This did not activate my X gene. I grew up like 5 miles away from a toxic waste dump.
Cool.
Where it was 17,000 barrels of I don't know what, were just in this 5-acre field enclosed, just decaying and leaking. And eventually that became an EPA Superfund site, and they had to build an incinerator there and vaporize all of it.
Should
you get any superpowers from that?
No, I'm like tremendous.
Didn't even get high from inhaling those
no, and it did not activate my X gene. I would have even taken one like, okay, like maybe I get a little disfigured like Nightcrawler or Beast or something. Whatever. It's still cool. It's still cool. Yeah. So I do care, but here's what I will say about as a kind of an overarching statement about the paranormal. I don't know what to think about it, but I'm fascinated by it. I kind of can't pull myself away from it. And although I did, and this is leading into my entire topic about art and the paranormal, I did kind of have a paranormal dark night of the soul over the summer.
Yes. We should talk about this.
Go on.
So I went to Point Pleasant, a notable spot, touch the statue's rear end. I was hoping I was hoping like I'm going to touch the statue's rear end.
People might not know Point Pleasant. This is a UFO show. It's not a cryptid show.
This is true. Well, those are linked though.
They are linked.
They are. I know.
John
UFOs. They're like that.
John Keel's The Mothman Prophecies, written in the late 60s, UFO flap in West Virginia. Also the sightings of this anomalous humanoid, dubbed the Mothman, even though he sounds, from the people's description, more like an owl man or a kind of a giant bug man, but it's stuck. And
sounds nice.
Really, I think somehow in the last, I don't know if it's through the exposure through the Hellier documentary or something, there's been some kind of mimetic, and part of it is because of the statue, like this mimetic explosion of popularity of the Mothman. Really has rocketed up the charts compared to like other anomalous humanoid sightings.
They've commercialized it really well. And I'm sitting in Pittsburgh right now, by the way, an amazing city that's basically an entire Superfund site, metropolis. But yeah, Point Pleasant has done a great job also commercializing this entire subject with the Mothman Festival, which if anyone hasn't been, totally worth attending. I ran the 5K a few years ago. They have a 5K, they have speakers, you can go on tours. It's kind of like a weird mix between like a comic book convention and like a tattoo convention and just, people into weird shit.
And they had a regional artist sculpt this steel statue of the Mothman, who's kind of squatting forward menacingly. You walk around behind, his buttocks are sublime. And it's become a thing. So I was hoping, I'm going to go to Point Pleasant, go to the Mothman Museum, buy some swag, touch the Mothman statue's rear end. I was really hoping that like at that moment the Valus laser would strike me, but I didn't get that either. And one of the things I bought when I was down there was I picked up John Keel's The Eighth Tower, which he wrote some years after Mothman Prophecies, and I would say it's kind of the sequel to that, and where Keel starts out talking about his ideas about the super spectrum and kind of adding psi phenomena onto the electromagnetic spectrum at some point. I think he believed that was really going to happen in the future. Eventually, as he's talking about kind of all the anomalous phenomena that he was subjected to, he gets into kind of a dark place where he's just like, this is all madness. The universe is insane. If you find yourself subjected to these phenomena, there's no meaning to be found. It is insane. And he gets a little like, I think he gets a little humanity is the virus. And I'm like, come on, John Keel, you wimp. You didn't even have the discourse. You weren't even on Twitter. Like, you can't throw in the towel. You can't throw in the towel like this, but he does. And he's like, there's psychic pollution, all these people thinking all these banal thoughts. And I kind of realized, at least to me, superficially, he's right. Okay. At least I thought so, because I feel like a year before this, we did our first PanParacon, which is another thing I'm involved with, online paranormal conference. I ended up doing a Tech in the Paranormal panel really quick, and my entire focus was kind of taking out like ye old EMF meter and going, what are we doing here? And this actually turned into a T-shirt out of the conference, because I said, I'm going in the house, haunted location. I'm attempting to verbally interact with an entity or just move through space in this house. I'm waiting for this to pop off. Now I'm getting like radio on a certain mean. What is the ghost doing? Maybe they're farting on me. Maybe there's EM emissions are like them. It's like a prank, and that's what that energy is on their plane or whatever. But I kind of realized that that's sort of like and this is, I feel like now, and this is where I'm going to get in trouble on this. I feel like I'm talking smack about everyone, and I'm not. I value these experiences. I think people going out having these experiences is extremely valuable, but mostly for the individuals having them. I think you're kind of participating in like a folkloric act, some kind of ritual. The device is your talisman. You go out, you have this experience, you come back. And people are existing in these models that are either, I know with this, I either need to gather enough empirical evidence, and this will prove it. It was a slam dunk. We can say ghosts are real. They're added to kind of the rational, realistic model of the universe that we think we live in, and I will get free breakfast at Denny's for the rest of my life. Or I need to collect more data, then that'll happen. Like there's a set amount of times where I'm going to go out and be like, I did the thing. I was like, hey, ghosts. And the thing had, and it's, we're fantastic. And I was reading another fellow's book who was just talking, and he kind of hit the same point where he's like, yeah, you can go out, people see things. They see these really irrational, strange things. And then what does it all mean? And then we really don't know how to interface with these phenomena. And I really felt very bad, kind of sad, because it's like, well, there's some fun stories. There's really, what are we getting out of this? Like, what does it all mean?
There's this almost like Lovecraftian horror, if you think about this all as just being insanity and completely meaningless. To me, that speaks to this absurd kind of nihilism that genuinely would be way more upsetting to people than ascribing some kind of meaning or purpose to these experiences.
I think we can do both, though. I think it can be madness without nihilism. At least this is where I'm going on this. So then I was driving to work, listening to What's Up Weirdo podcast, and this was I didn't know this. John Tenney's on there, and he was talking. He's like, para just means next to. Para is the next to. So when you see somebody like a ghost hunter, and they're like, I'm like, if I was like, I'm Para J, he's like next to J. It's like, okay.
Oh, it's like Leah Prime.
Yes. But I realized psychologically that a lot of people, because I worked in the arts. I worked in advertising. I worked in the arts. 1,000 years ago, I worked as a art museum security guard, all modern contemporary, which is honestly one of the greatest. I mean, not the most fun job because you're just standing, but it's one of the greatest insights into the how perception works with people, and what are the means of perception with them. So what I realized is people viewing, and we're focused on modern contemporary here, and we're going to end up drilling down to a few schools with this. Looking at art is analogous to having that paranormal experience. Looking at the painting is analogous to having the Mothman, because essentially, what makes this paranormal is it is not something we're used to seeing. Like if there was a Mothman in my backyard every day when I go to feed the birds, it'd just be like, out of here. Like, this is not like peanuts are for the crows, not for you, man. Go. But we don't. And when we operate in the world, we all see it the same enough that we can function in it together. But that sort of gives us we end up with a shared library of symbols, a shared library of meanings, a shared library of objects. And when we confront something that's way outside of that, we have at least the way we're raised and trained and educated in this country, the initial urge is to immediately try to force that experience, what we're seeing, into one of those existing frameworks. Because when you're standing around in the art museum, hanging out with people, they'll come in, they'll look at the painting, and they'll go, it's a painting that is it does not depict any thing that is recognizable in the real world, or depict things in an order that is recognizable in the real, and they'll say they don't get it. And it's that same kind of, we're confronting the unknown, we're trying to force it into a framework. We're not having a lot of fun doing it, but I ended up thinking about this, because if we have time, I'll try to go back to this. One of the things that's really funny about art training is there's not a lot of theory, believe it or not. Theory is mostly the province of people that pursue art history. When you're actually going in to do the stuff, doing it is more it's a different process. It's more of an apprenticeship process. It's more of guiding. It's more of honing your own instincts as you work in whatever the thing you're working in. And you really and you kind of end up doing this until you get I got it, it works now. And it's very it's a very hands-on process. But if you're we're discussing the whys, it's I never knew the whys. I didn't know the whys until I started looking on my own for some of this stuff. And I ended up actually going and studying the roots of the Surrealists, because I feel like the Surrealists are the most applicable to the paranormal. And the Surrealists were actually quite heavily influenced by the occult in their day, as well as psychology as it was coming, a little bit of Freudian, a lot more Jung. But the Surrealists were really looking at their goal, the ultimate stated goal of the Surrealist Manifesto was to merge the reality with dreams with the reality of perception into a super reality. And they were big on this idea of these things we perceive in dreams, the logic of dreams holds keys in metaphors to things that we can eventually discover and do this integration with conscious thought. And they were big. The original guys were big Hegelian dialectic guys, and then a lot of them were they were dialectical materialists, but it's weird. I'm like, how does that work when I was reading about this? But then I'm like, but they had an occult view of reality. They had an occult view of the material world. So it was kind of like, you guys are cheating, but I get it. Like, it works. But it's the same. And and this is where I'm at on this. This is a new idea. And I don't have a conclusion, but I feel like this is a tool. And this is something that I hope, kind of starting down this road, is somewhere that can lead us somewhere fruitful discussing this stuff, or getting something a little better out of it. Really, though, I think what's funny is a lot of our current kind of jargon for this stuff is what separates our thinking in it. Okay.
Oh yeah.
I really consider, so these guys were, a lot of them were practicing occultists, and a lot of them had an occult framework, mystical framework of the world. I consider, as the language transition, we kind of moved from that to this framework of using the word supernatural. But supernatural, I feel like now there's like a connotation of, if I say supernatural, I have to be like, the mist swirl, and it's very, and then that we're now in the 90s, we're in paranormal, which is really a rational, like kind of like a rational categorization of this stuff. But if we switch words, we can say, if we're saying we're going to look at this supernatural phenomena, that lets us look at it like occultists, that lets us look at it as something that isn't meant to be like forced in one framework to make sense, but we can use, we can synthesize a new perception of reality by looking consciously.
Dude, first of all, this rules. I'm like dying in the background listening to this. Like, anyone who's going to bring up Hegel in this conversation, like, incredible. So I've been, I'm going to tip my hand here and say, so I've been working through the archives of Subliminal Jihad, and I don't know if any of you guys listen to that podcast. I'm not sure I exactly recommend it, but it's basically Q, but for the left, where in the sense that like they're talking about the right stuff, but for the wrong reasons. And the first few episodes are about Michael Aquino, who is the head of the Temple of Set and left the Church of Satan, and then was like also the head of like psyops at the army, and talking about the influence that may have had on different cultural and military events in the latter half of the 20th century. But the next bulk of episodes, like episodes 6 through 9, they talk tons about the role of the occult in popular culture and the role of the occult in early Hollywood and cinema. And I kind of, up to and including not just early cinema, but where it shows up today. And one of the movies they talked about a lot was Doctor Strange, and how there is this kind of application and arrival of occult images and symbolism and practices into popular media, and what, if any, kind of meaning we can or should derive from that. And I just bring this up because I do think, to me, it feels like there's like the occult is so well recognized and understood at this point, just popularly. It doesn't seem kind of clandestine or esoteric to include it in popular media, but it still seems to touch that kind of strange, uncanny place that adds like a sparkle of mystery to whatever the story or movie or artwork will actually be. Oh, I have someone else who's into Subliminal Jihad. Excellent.
Nice. I don't listen to that, but it's an interesting. I think when I said like I don't know what to say about the paranormal, but I can't stop looking at it, or the supernatural. I think that the mystery is kind of centrally compelling to it.
Yep.
And I had a quote from Magritte that even if none of this works, let me pull this up real quick, because Magritte had something really good to say because I was like, well, what if you end up at the bottom with this again? But Magritte described his paintings saying they evoke mystery, and indeed when one sees my pictures and one asks a simple question, what does it mean? It doesn't mean anything, because mystery means nothing either. It's unknowable.
That's
and
beautiful.
I think
It gives me anxiety. I like it.
I look at that as that's like the final fallback position. If after decades of study and attempting to synthesize dreams, art, and paranormal phenomena into a conscious super reality fails, you got that. You just pull that one out of your pocket and you're like, mystery.
Well, Jay, you got me thinking about a lot of stuff with what you said. Well, especially like it's funny you brought up a quote about Magritte, because immediately when you're talking about the art and the UFO stuff, I was thinking of his famous painting that's just of a pipe, and then it says "Ceci n'est pas une pipe," which is like, this is not a pipe. And it's like, well, it's a painting of a pipe. Does that mean that it is a pipe or not? And you get into the words and the language, and it matters so much. And this is something I've talked to fellow skeptics about a fair bit. It's like, is it a UFO or not? Like, does it matter? What is the language? Like, how does that play into it? And then there's this whole side of it that you're getting at with the art and the surrealism, especially with dream states, right? Like Salvador Dali was getting into dreams and things like that. And at the time, dreams were very mysterious still in the 20s and 30s and things like that. And they were just getting into studying them in detail. And do you think that there's any kind of parallel there where like dreams are still meaningful, but like even people who like think that UFOs are like a non-human intelligence or supernatural, like interdimensional, like they don't generally like attribute super amounts of significance to dreams, but they're still meaningful to people and they still influence our lives. Is there something along those lines that you're sort of getting at, that we apply the meaning and it can still be very meaningful without intrinsically literally being what it is?
I think when we look at dreams, a lot of logic of dreams ends up having that significance on a personal level. Although what I find fascinating about it is the logic of dreams ends up dovetailing with the logic of how entities or objects behave in a lot of reports. I think one of the things I feel like we're going through now compared to, say, 20 years ago. Okay, so 20 years ago, little me, like watching the X-Files and being really into this stuff then, really like the consensus of that was sort of, the EBE hypothesis is real. For whatever reason, we just kind of like, everybody just kind of, though, I one of the things I find interesting about us is a lot of stuff that's brought up to support that we sort of been cognitively blind to. Like everybody will bring up like the Space Brother era encounters, but I'm like, do you have Space Brothers anymore? Like, does anybody like had a Space Brother thing, like, like last month? Anybody been told abandon your nuclear arms, etc.? And I think I've seen this in I feel like the Momo, the Missouri monster sighting, is kind of a quintessential one of these. And then I know Joshua Kuchin documented a bunch of Bigfoot sightings that have a lot of extra high strangeness, including UFO encounters, including phantom lights, including a lot of classic poltergeist activity. And I can't remember this guy's name. He's really, I do have a bad memory. The guy, the Sierra Sounds guy. The guy's a famous, in Bigfoot, in the world of Bigfoot. This guy and his buddies went
Ron
out.
Moorhead.
Ron Moorhead and his buddies, they're out. They recorded Bigfoot hollering at each other. They're hooting, they're hollering, they're having a good time or not. We don't know.
Right.
But they found like they had this. You could get this. You can still buy this from Ron Moorhead's website. It used to be on record. It's a CD now. Maybe you can get it as a download. Ron has been messing with Bigfoot this whole time. He wrote a book called The Quantum Bigfoot, where he's like, there's also all this high strangeness. I found all of these really weird things that happened to me. I think it's some kind of, if it's an animal, it comes from another dimension or something. He's got a lot of, I mean, I feel like, and this is, I get this because it's very easy to do and I don't understand it well enough to say no, but it's easy to kind of go like quantum and you know, for a lot of people, but it's really the larger point is there's a lot of these things are really weirder than, like, there's been people publishing papers, people publishing books, people in these fields have omitted a lot of like really crazy stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I remember Rob Christofferson was on PanParacon the first time, and he did a show that he cut it. It's on his podcast. He's talking about African encounters of UFOs, and he's talking about one that like it landed and then legs came out of the saucer and they're walking around, and it's like, and again, it is that surreal logic of dreams. Like if I was telling you I had a dream and there was a flying saucer and then it grew legs and it walked up to me and then my clothes changed and then something, it wouldn't, the part of that story, like if I was telling you that whole story is a dream, you'd be sure. And if I was like, well, actually, the part with the legs, people saw that, and we're trying to dovetail that into or like, it's like, you know, I also feel like when people are editing, now I see, because unfortunately the internet has ruined my mind like everyone else. I see the gif of Jonah, what's his name, just being like, no, that one's out.
Jonah Hill, yeah.
Jonah cutting that one out. So I actually feel, get back kind of to the original thing, I do feel like because of the phenomena that people are encountering is a lot of the times weirder than the narrative. It's worth considering what we can, like, can we interpret use the same kind of interpretation? Or even when I say conscious thought, this is where I'm like, think about it rather than just say, I don't know, they had a big machine, like I don't know how many PSI those legs are on. But it's like, why did I see that? What did that mean?
That's so Bernardo Kastrup, I bring up his book Meaning and Absurdity.
I just finished it.
Oh, dude!
Like a day ago.
Oh, amazing! What are your thoughts? What did you think about this? Because that's what's coming to mind as you're giving your view on this.
I think it's possible. I think this is the issue. I think if I had any one issue with Kastrup, this goes back to anything. We really don't know anything. And that's a little, like, I had, is anybody familiar with Dr. Scott Rago? Okay. Scott Rago, I feel like Scott Rago should be famous on the level of Jacques Vallee or Keel. But Rago's a parapsychologist. He was a real deal parapsychologist. And like, I feel like Rago and Kastrup would, like, if Rago was still alive, they could have a really good discussion, because Rago would have agreed with Kastrup up until the point where he said, no, it's really happening. Like, you're really, like, psi is real and people are manifesting this stuff. And it's not like a Jungian metaphor. It's like this guy really had enough juice to like bring a flying saucer out. And because he talks, one of Rago's first book, and I know Kastrup talks about the Miracle of Fatima. Okay. And Rago is convinced that it was it's convenient, literally sort of a comic book type of thing. Like, the kids were there and they had the juice and they made the thing appear and people really saw it and they're really manifesting, and it really did put out some like UV and people got a tan and then it went pop. That was one of the things I will say. One of the most fun things is Keel has this hypothesis that dovetails with this, that all of these creatures are assembled. You know, he's talking there, the mad cosmic intelligence is assembling all these creatures, the Bigfoot, the saucer, the Mothman, whatever, out of some kind of radioactive compound that has a really high half-life, and that's why they go poof. They're calling the Mothman into physical existence. He exists. he's got like a radioactive half-life of 14 days. That's why, you know, what is it? It's the blindness you get, the pink eye
radiation. Yeah.
Yes.
Which was among Mothman witnesses, right?
Yeah, fun, but not fun if you get it.
Sure.
I guess I could probably stand a little Mothman conjunctivitis, but
worth it.
I like it. It's certainly possible. I mean, I was also watching this thing a little earlier that was where is this thing? Consciousness in the Interface Theory of Perception, Donald Hoffman.
Yep.
Which I feel like Hoffman and Kastrup those guys would probably like to hang out.
Highly complimentary.
Yeah.
His book, The Case Against Reality, is totally worth reading.
I do feel, though, that no matter what you're getting into using art, like going to the art museum, going to the modern contemporary gallery, hanging out with the surrealist, also hanging out with the real abstract, the abstract expressionist people as a pure form. Because one of the things I don't feel like we do ever really well is communicate with these entities. And you're looking at the abstract artist communication really in the form of its like most distilled pure emotion on there. And I think you can kind of build your internal toolkit looking at that stuff and reacting consciously and kind of noting. It's I would say it's sort of akin to meditation, but you're trying to figure something out instead of figure yourself out.
Jay, what's your experience as an artist? Are you an artist yourself?
Yes. I am primarily, so like a lot of people, kind of the arc you go is you want to be an artist, and then you either become a fine artist and end up getting a job doing something else, luck out into getting into the system of being able to like get into galleries, get into the stuff. But that generally requires, there's a lot of expense. You have to have a master's for that. So I have a bachelor in fine art. I did printmaking and drawing for my bachelor's. I mostly do photography now. Really interested in lens-based imagery. And I then went and got another bachelor's, double bachelor's, 2 art degrees in graphic design. And I work primarily in advertising, and I see those are sort of two sides of the same coin. When I tell my students, I said, advertising is using, words and images to create a specific effect. We're trying. I think it's. I have this whole thing where it's magic. Yeah. It's magic. And I said, basically, we create a soft reality where there's the possibility of the thing, and then hopefully reality hardens around it. The one example I always used for my classes was, remember VR goggles? Remember the VR goggles that you put your phone in? And everybody got those for like Christmas of 2017. Mine are in the cabinet next to here. I think they're probably pretty dusty. But that was basically, we're hitting the point. It was like, we're going to use psychic driving on the masses. And this is one of those things.
It's like some Adam Curtis shit.
Like everybody's, I did a couple podcasts a year or two ago that everybody I hate to say this is either good or bad, but when everybody hears like psyops and thinks of like Michael Aquino and stuff, 85% of that is just basic like Edward Bernays and advertising. If you you read Bernays about propaganda and public relations, and then just kind of get into it and work on it and work on some basic like Robert Cialdini basic low-level compliance techniques. That's really when it's like psyop sounds cool. Like psyop sounds like I am in Cobra and I'm like the Cobra psyops guy, and I've got like a backpack with a dish antenna, and it's like, but by and large, it's just the basics of those guys. And I think, art, on the other hand, can be, art doesn't have to communicate to everybody effectively. Art can be more selective, and art can deal with these things that are, I do feel like one of the things, and that art can do, is transcend the limits of spoken and written language. I feel like it can convey the ineffable and the phantasmagoric and go, if you let it, bypass a lot of that rational buildup you have and really communicate to you on a deep level. I also think you can do like magic with art, but that's like a whole other thing.
Yes.
What about what do you think of Bud Hopkins? Somebody like Bud Hopkins, or who's the other guy, Whitley Strieber? Both artists. What do they bring? Even like their science is a little bit wonky, let's say. Like, what do they bring as artists to the discussion?
I think it has made Strieber, and I can't remember. I'm not like up on my Bud Hopkins lore, although I have his, like, there's a new book out on him that I want to get. But I think with Strieber, personally, I think it's made him it's really made him an effective communicator. Like Strieber, for me, I remember being terrified of Communion, like a lot of people were when they first read it.
Book cover too.
Well, the book cover too. But the book cover, that always makes me wonder what like low-level symbolic language is embedded in that face, because man, that's really, but I think Strieber is able, being in touch with those emotions, was able to actually do a better job writing from that. Although I compare Strieber to somebody like, have you seen the Love and Saucers documentary, everyone? Okay, this is on Prime streaming. This guy, I can't remember the fellow's name, but his like sole romantic and sexual encounter in life was with an alien. And he's painted numerous pictures of her and their life together and his hybrid children and the mantis and the other. And I think for him, he's able to tell a much more coherent story with his images than he is with words. I don't know if Strieber really was able to bridge the gap between language and visual imagery, or be very evocative in his prose, but that's a wild ride, by the way. Everybody should check that out. It's not that long. It's like a real short documentary, and it's just again, one of those, like, sort of does bridge that imagery. Like, if you just said these were surrealist paintings and these all came from the dream world, bubbled up from the collective unconsciousness, if you're Jungian, like Kastrup, and some of the actual surrealists in the school were, I believe they were getting into that. I also look at Kandinsky. I've been reading Kandinsky's Concerning the Spiritual and Art this week, and Kandinsky really believes that there is a supernatural element to being able to use color and shape to convey meaning directly into the soul of the viewer. If the whatever, I don't know if this is like, mind, body, soul, whatever your paradigm for that is, he really thought that was a distinct possibility, and he was doing that. But Kandinsky and those guys were all big. They were big theosophists.
Yes,
and they were.
That's what I was. I was just going to say, that's what I was thinking of, was theosophy and thought forms by because it feels like they're closely intertwined with Kandinsky as well. Anyway.
The things I keep running into in disparate studies between artists and sci and the paranormal are the root of the theosophists and just kind of the sacred shapes of circle, square, triangle, which really were prominent in the movement called neoplastic art, which is, I posted my cool Hot Wheels truck. Piet Mondrian was a neoplasticist, and he really believed that was like his art was with those limited colors and geometric shapes was conveying a spiritual truth. Hilma Klint was she wasn't a spiritualist, she was a spiritist. Important difference. And a lot of those people also were big believers. And this again, I feel like this kind of dovetails going back to Kastrup or Rago, depending on what flavor of this is really real or it's real but not real. Using intuitive writing and intuitive drawing to draw those ideas out and organize them. But I just picked up, because I love comics, I picked up that Mutants and Mystics, the supernatural in comic art. And the first thing the guy references in his acknowledgments is Mind to Mind by Rene Wacolier, which is a popular... I guess this was popular. Inigo Swan wrote the preface for it. This was kind of 60s, 70s, but he was French, didn't really make it big into the US, talking about us sharing these subconscious, unconscious images in our dreams via states of mental telepathy. See, part of what, if you buy into what Kastrup is talking about basically us all being linked by the collective unconscious and these events bubbling up through the collective unconscious, then using art as your foothold to start unraveling this stuff becomes very useful, because it's not solely personally significant anymore. Then it's becoming, there's some levels of significance to us as a people, as certain symbols like the flying saucer or Bigfoot keep reoccurring.
Well, Jay, you mentioned abstract expressionism, and in anthropology, when cave art started appearing, it's considered a very important time in evolutionary history, right? It's humans coming up with novel things. And it seems to me that there's a natural process, or maybe something more occurring in the human mind. I'm a materialist, I admit it. But there clearly is a fundamental process occurring throughout human history. We have basically every culture describing these sort of similar experiences of what we in the modern world use. And once again, the language comes in, information downloads, and historically would have it be a supernatural entity having communing with the supernatural. And then we have people like Nikola Tesla and things describing something very similar, but through a scientific lens, perhaps because he was so into electromagnetism, and now we have all of these things about the ghosts and all that perhaps being associated with that. But so there's an interpretive element, and now we have in the modern science language, people are describing the same kind of thing, a novel experience of something kind of appearing in your mind, and interpreting that as coming from outside your mind. So there's no question that's a subjective experience people have been having through history. As an artist, Jay, I'm curious if you've had an experience like that. And if not, what do you make of those kinds of experiences? And if so, all the same thing.
I haven't had a bolt from the blue, but I've had a lot of thoughts about process recently. So again, I took a class at the Rhine School, and it was called Art is Sci. It was taught by Dr. Chantal Toprow, who's a really interesting character. You should check her out. She used to be, I think she used to work for JPL, but now she's she's also investigated for MUFON and did a lot of stuff. And as part of the paper for that, I did a paper on radionics and art. And I don't know if, again, are anybody familiar with radionics? Okay, radionics is, depending on who you ask, it's either a suppressed miracle technology or junk pseudoscience.
Cool.
Yes, and kind of the thing that went through the early 20th century. People are pioneering radionics treatment to diagnose illnesses and then to eventually treat them. Sort of related to some other things, kind of like you could put it on the same shelf with chromotherapy, and you could put your radionics machine next to your orgone accumulator. So kind of vibing on that, but one of the main evolutionary factors in the development of radionics was the development of the literal user interface of these machines, because they're machines, and people, you'll laugh at this, like if you see it, but you're turning dials and you're moving your finger until you feel your finger stop, and that's how you need a dial set. And this is how you develop your setting on your machine. But read another artist who's a radionics practitioner guy, Duncan Laurie, wrote a book called The Secret Art, which is an excellent history of this whole. I have less view it as a pseudoscience and more as like the first, like, honestly modern paradigm for magical practice. But what he talks about is the I'm sorry, I'm really taking the long way around the barn with this, but that the stick is the equivalent to the dowsing reflex. Cool. And the dowsing reflex, I didn't realize this. There's a lot of debate among dowsers whether that comes from within or from without, whether that's a external manifestation or something, or an inward process. But what I realized, and you were talking about this going back to the cave people and some of this, I realized it's a combination of things. When I was talking about art, because you don't teach art by theory, you teach art by doing. And basically, it again is that feeling that in. So I have really come to see the decision-making process for me as an artist is akin to the dowsing reflex, the dowsing process. And
dude, this is, I'm just going to interrupt. This is killing me because I always talk about the relationship between dowsing and like what you're saying, like creativity, and also like getting a sense of like what the next move is, like what is the next best step to take with something. I always, and that's something I've taught. I don't know if I've talked about on this show, but it's so wild to hear someone else talk about this sort of dowsing as an applied thing outside of just trying to find water. Like so, it's part of the creative process.
I do think I do think we come, whether this is, again, am I channeling this from the collective unconscious, or does it come preloaded? We do have some software that helps us make those decisions. I don't know anybody is familiar with Gestalt psychology much. Gestalt, it has to do with the organization of how we perceive the organization of things. And it's really elementary, and it's kind of like, basically, if I'm like, I have two tools, and if they're here, they're not together. And if they're here, they're symbolically linked in our mind as this together, even though when you really think about it, there's nothing that's linking them other than proximity. And there's a lot of Gestalt examples, and I don't want to say tricks, but there's like, these are ways you can apply Gestalt to create effect and flow in graphic design, user experience, etc. And then that in turn influences human behavior. But I think it's a combination of having that kind of low level operating system for how we organize things visually, and then using, and really, and this is where I end up telling my students when I'm teaching, it's like you have to do a lot of stuff. Like you have to go dowsing a lot. You have to create a lot of work. You have to do this a lot, because that's really you learning to listen to that intuition or psi impulse or whatever we're calling it. I don't think I went to psi impulse in my class. I don't know if the children, they're college seniors, but I don't know if the children would have appreciated that or not. But so while not having again, like not having never having like stepped in front of a piece in a museum or created a piece and felt that, like, again, like give me that Valence laser, give me that zap. I haven't had that yet, but I definitely this is basically the honing your ability to listen to your intuition through that, akin to dowsing, is basically how I make art.
I want to go back and talk about something you touched on really early.
Absolutely.
You were talking about PanParacon, which I do want to hear more about too. For
absolutely.
For people who don't. But specifically, you did a piece on tech and the paranormal, and you focused on EMF meters. I've personally been trying to kind of find the origin of that practice.
Me too.
Oh, okay.
Okay, let's talk about this.
Yeah. So the earliest I have theories about it, but the earliest I see like application and use of that's that people would even know would, be early episodes of like Sightings with Dr. William Roll bringing in electronic equipment essentially to test Michael Persinger's theories, right? And I think producers kind of picked up on that, and that's why you see it on TV now, because they wanted something akin to Ghostbusters, waving a thing around. But do you know anything more about this?
No, I've been digging too. So the best that I have found, I found a couple of very, in terms of web years, like 98 era ghost hunting equipment. Like, here's what you can buy. I'm thinking that it entered the zeitgeist with Ghost Hunters.
I mean,
that show,
basically
only things that I found scientifically weren't about EMF strictly. It was other. I found some papers in the 70s that I still need to pony up the cash to read.
Right.
From the Rhine and from some other parapsychologist studies more about electricity and the possible connection of electricity in the spirit world. But the meters, the meters are like a ritual tool.
I liked how you described them in the beginning, like they are the talisman you bring in the ritual, because that is essentially what's happening now. But I think that, back in, I'm not sure if it was happening anytime between the 60s and the 80s, when parapsychology and ghost hunting kind of crossed over, and the attendees of kind of one group was visiting the lectures of the other. And we were essentially trying to quantify the secular soul, which is what these energies are that they're trying to be looking for, kind of a replacement.
I feel like all of that in the heyday of parapsychology was all laboratory setting stuff, though. I don't feel anybody was running around, because those tools originally are like tools for cable installers.
Right. You're also wave them, right? Aren't they supposed to be level?
Yeah. I mean, it's a little our application. Well, this is my root of that is decisions. I have the same things. I feel like decisions have been made at some point. And I don't know if this is us doing our best, because, you go on. I remember stumbling years ago, like 5 years ago, on a ghost hunting equipment website. And this was kind of like, this is real. Oh my God. I was like, I want all this stuff too, because I want to take it apart and play with it and see what's. in there, which is how I found out. Everybody at home, make your own REM pods. They're just theremins. You can get theremin kits on Amazon. Don't pay that big REM pod money.
Can you talk about the differences between Keel and Vallee, and maybe why Vallee never really got into the cryptids?
I don't. I actually really think the differences between Keel and Vallee was that Vallee was a scientist and Keel was a newspaper man. I feel like Keel. I feel like Keel was more like me, for lack of a better term. He's a layman, and he got drawn into this stuff, and he was making a buck from it. Although I'm not making a buck from this, nor am I trying. But I feel like Vallee was really trying to be a scientist at first. And I feel like Vallee really, for lack of a better way to put it, I feel like Vallee's early work, especially Passport to Magonia, is really paradigm defining, where I feel like Keel, on the other hand, grabbed the pop culture heart. And while the aficionados of the weird are familiar with both of those guys, I feel like Keel's, when you think about, like, everybody's read Mothman Prophecies, not a lot of people have read Eighth Tower. He's got some other anthology stuff, and other than and I mean, like, one of the things that's, like, a lot of people have also made Indrid Cold into kind of that same level of, like, celebrity character as the Mothman. And in Eighth Tower, he's like, that was bullshit. Right. You know, like, that guy, I didn't believe that guy. So I don't, I think their approach is just, journalist versus scientist, and it yielded really different results. And I think it even yielded different results in how they promoted their work, and how that work ends up kind of viewed and digested by the community as a whole.
The distinction between Keel and Vallee reminds me of what we were talking about before the show about politicians. There's some who repeat the rhetoric, and there's some who just completely buy it. And I think Vallee completely buys it. I think he's a really credulous person. But I think that there's, like, a big distinction between, like, deductive things. Like, he is a scientist and a smart person, just like people like Dr. Gary Nolan. There's these deductive logic, and then there's inductive. And I think that's kind of the distinction. Like, these things that we're talking about here aren't quantifiable as much as we might try to make them with EMF meters and things like that. But then there's solid facts and science and stuff, which, like, there are clear answers to, and, like, quantifiable things. And I think that's kind of how these, academic types start believing in strange, kooky things like that.
None of us are. One of the things, though, about that talk too is I realized none of us we're not doing science. None of us are qualified to do science. One of the things that I did not write this. I dug this article up, but I was kind of skeptical about the legendary Panasonic DR60. Okay, Panasonic, for people, again, I feel like it's fun to cross-pollinate between different pockets of the weird. Panasonic DR60 is the first digital voice recorder ever released. I want to say in the 80s, early 90s. Was not a big hit because people would play it and hear other voices on it. And that turned into a thing. Well, it's recording. I got to do the hands, like, it's recording the spirits of the dead, and they go for, like, upwards of $3,500 now.
Incredible.
And if you're a ghost hunt investigator and you want to do electronic voice phenomena, that's the grail. But I was kind of like, well, I don't know, because, again, I don't know. I'm not. Anything if you see me post electronics, you got to remember I'm self-taught. I do not take a minor in electrical engineering or anything.
Right.
But once you start playing with it yourself, you kind of realize some of these things. There's an article basically that the guy's like, yeah, this is why the DR60, why it does that, why that extra voice thing is in there. And it's really a function of the limitations of the hardware down to the level of like the memory in the thing and like some of the components they had. And I would give you like $50 for one because it's cool, but it's just, but people, again, it is the totem. It is like we bring forth the totem and the totem sanctifies the result. And it's very,
all these gadgets are being used outside of their intended purpose or are like deliberately broken, like a spirit box or something like that. So using them as a totem in a ritual serves like a far greater purpose than any readings they're picking up on these things, I would think.
One of the other things, though, too, is that I'm hoping, you know, the story of benzene, that the benzene molecule came to him in a dream.
Oh, no.
Yeah. I'm hoping one of the things, if we start to try to use inductive logic, we will have some breakthroughs like that. We will have some of those jumps forward as we intend to create the synthesis. But because I just, again, like, I feel like you can have a meaningful personal experience running around with your gadgets. And I do. I have a whole little case full of gadgets. I'm like, let's go play with our toys. But
I'm absolutely,
I say that, I feel like I said that, and somebody like that's a really serious paranormal investigator is going to see this and be like, and I'm sorry, I love you. I also have a very cultivated, a very like try to be playful with this stuff rather than take it it's not take what I'm doing seriously, but to some extent, like I try to couch it in playful language. Or a lot of the I'm also a member of the Liminal Earth crew, and a lot of the little experiments, it's not really an experiment, it's kind of like a more akin to like a Discordian ritual or some kind of little fun thing we're doing. We're interacting with the unknown, but fun. That's
awesome. I touched on it again, but can you tell us a little more about your it's a video conference, right?
It's a video conference. So we did, it's PanParacon, PanParacon.com. We did it 2 years running. It's a video conference. I think our two things were, we had a lot of people originally that wanted to go to Michigan Paracon and couldn't because of the pandemic. And while I know a lot of the pandemic's over for a lot of people, it's still not over for a lot of people that are immunocompromised. And so we put it together, and the original one went together in about a month.
Wow.
Vanessa Valuco and Marissa, who I don't know if Marissa wants her last name out there, so we'll just leave it, and me doing web and some back-end digital in our graphics and stuff. And we did our thing, frankly, is not as much emphasized of us. It's like, look, we're like the bearded white guys plus one. So we're trying to open it up to a lot of people that don't get to speak. We had a lot of people that haven't been on the conference circuit. Try to keep it more representation for queer people, non-binary people, a lot of and we have a lot of different stuff. We had everything ranging. Liminal Earth did a liminal ecology seminar, which was really interesting. We had people talk about the phenomenon in pop culture. We had witches. We had Rob on talking about UFOs. I did the tech panel with Adler Cooper, who's one of the only hard scientists into the weird that I'm aware of that you can actually get to talk to. And we did it again. We did it again last year. We had a lot of witches. We had a diversity panel. We had some really good stuff. And I don't know what we're doing this year as far as guests, because once you realize you can, Vanessa is doing her podcast, and a lot of our guests are on the podcast, so she's working her butt off all the time on it. But once you realize, like, you can update the website and create schedules and stuff in about a month. Like, we tried to start working on it a lot last year, but you sort of know it's like, yeah, we could do this. So,
but there will be a third.
I hope so.
Awesome.
I'm gonna find out. We had all had personally a lot of personal hardship last year, and I think we're all kind of recovering from that. But we were talking about bringing it back. We're talking keeping it streaming, keeping it free. We try to pay people out of the tip jar. So I'm 100% doing that. Like, thanks for coming out, you know, tip your speakers, that whole thing, and try to get people to hawk books. I think for some people that are more invested in this as their primary source of income, it's important to go table somewhere and have books, which unfortunately we can't do. I'm gonna try to have some entertainment this year. I don't know. We're a lot of ideas flying around, but there are a lot of interesting people with interesting things to talk about out there. And when you're not trying to like pack a convention hall, you don't have to worry about like, got to have my anchor speaker, like the big gun. Although we might have a big gun someday. I don't know. It's entirely possible. But I really like being able to do it. Kind of, it's like this, but for days. I really need to get a better seat cushion. That's like the number one expense. By the end of it, like on Sunday, I will be lying on the floor, just kind of like clamber back up when it's time to make a transition.
Oh man, these 2-hour shows kill me. So I know you don't
know.
I never bothered. They never bothered me, but now I'm in this Airbnb on this awful office chair with a non-adjustable desk, and I'm dying. Yeah.
Oh, that was that's a whole digression. Like, lack of when I transitioned to work from home, the ergonomic setup at home that I didn't use that much like ruined my life. I'm just was like this crippled shell of myself until I got desk and chair and everything a little more dialed in.
I'm the opposite. Once I went remote, I started off with a big setup, and now I'm just down to the laptop and a mobile around the apartment all the time now. I don't know.
Wow.
Jay, I'm wondering, have you ever had a paranormal experience of any intensity? And I'm wondering what triggered your original interest in the subject. If it was an experience, or if somebody influential in your life motivated you to look into it more.
I have had them, but they've been pretty low intensity. I can tell you about them if you want. I have one that I you know what, I will actually say I've had one that was definitely medium high intensity. But actually the interest was my folks left. They had just on the coffee table, when you throw some books on the coffee table, there was there's a book on a Loch Ness monster that I still have, even though the Loch Ness monster is pretty much done.
He's toast.
A classic of the genre, Don Berlitz's Bermuda Triangle book. Yeah. Which again, I know again, we're mostly done with that. Although I secretly hope for a Bermuda Triangle comeback every year. But
that'd be awesome.
I've had a few, and they've been pretty low key. Except for the one I had, and this is where, again, it feels like dream logic, and it's very hard to interpret in terms of normal terms. I had a legit glitch in the Matrix once.
Go on.
Used to go, my old job, our advertising agency was in an office building, just like in an office building in an office park. And I used to go walk laps around the building when I would need to think. And this is very simple. Just walking around front of the building, woman in a silver Mercedes pulls in, parks in front of the building. And I'm like, oh, she's parking right in front of us. She must have a client meeting with somebody. Totally a normal thing to happen. walk around the building the whole way around, get right back to where I was. Same woman in the same car pulls in the same spot, gets out and goes in the building. But again, like that was it. And since like reality's not degrading, you know, or like the door doesn't open up and it's like, you just kind of, you're like the John Travolta in Pulp Fiction, just kind of like, well, is that it? Do I, you know, I'm like, I did one more lap and it didn't happen that time. So I'm like, well, clearly, like, it's not like I'm having a real micro Groundhog Day or something. But
what was like your emotional and somatic or bodily response when you experienced this?
I was totally calm about that, but I will tell you, it's been a long time ago, and I put it on a biography. I used to be a pilot, not professionally, but I got my private pilot's license, and I used to fly, and I gave it up because it's basically the world's most expensive bag of potato chips. You pay a lot of money to rent the plane, fly it somewhere, get out at this other airport, get a bag of chips, get a soda or something, then fly it back because somebody is waiting for it to go fly it around after you. But part of that whole process of training, that sort of like, I feel like it sort of permanently dampens your somatic response to a lot of things because you're doing it on purpose. So when we have an emergency incident in the air, you are calm and you can execute your, like, whatever the correct procedure is to not die, given whatever the event is that unfolding. And somehow, even though I did that in my teenage years, that seems to have frozen as part of me. I was definitely bewildered, but unlike some of these other incidents, it seems so mundane. I wasn't really like able to decode any kind of sign out of like a middle-aged woman in a silver Mercedes. Like that just seemed like that seemed like natural that's naturally occurring for this area. Okay, like that, she looks like she's here to do some business with somebody, and we're in an office park, and you know, in an office building, an office park, and this is where so it wasn't like I ran into her in the wilderness, which would have been extremely disconcerting. So I don't know. It was very just like, I don't know what that was. And I did have one, and this was like, I will not say it was traumatic because of the speed at which I recovered, but I lived in an off-campus house when I was doing my first degree, and it was owned by the school, but it was actually off the campus. It was one of those very old millionaires' row houses that they partitioned into dorm rooms. And of course, the lore from older students is the house is haunted. And I don't know, at that point in my life, I really believed in this stuff to the point where it was everything though. And I even remember trying to write a paper. I was going to write freshman in college, going to write a research paper that proves the EBE hypothesis. That did not go well. I had a C on that one. But one night we were hanging out at the house and we were having a few beers, and somebody was like, let's go up in the attic and have a seance. And I'm like, few beers and I'm like, I'm game for a seance today, but we went up
party,
right? We went up, the door to the attic was locked, we got it open. It was an old door. We're able to get in there. We're kind of sitting up there, and the one guy is trying to kind of conduct this. We're not holding hands, we're all just sitting, and he's just like, be very relaxed and very open. And I'm sitting there trying to be relaxed and open, and all of a sudden I start crying uncontrollably. Just uncontrollable sadness and tears. the guy who's conducting the seance, known amongst all of us is just like the most calm, unperturbable person, starts screaming at me to stop. Like, you shut up, and this whole thing. And my two pals.
This is better than the Mercedes story.
This is, oh yeah, that's, yeah. It definitely is. Drag me, just kind of had to pick me up, help me downstairs. You know how it'd be like if somebody was like, you know, like somebody can't stand at a funeral of a really close person, but we got downstairs, they dragged him out, and it was gone from us. Whatever that emotion was we were no longer feeling it. And basically all we came up with was like, don't poke the bear. Like, let's not do that shit again.
Feels like CE5 to me in a way.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like it's speaking to.
And I mean, I hate to say this because the only frame of reference we had was like Ghostbusters. So we're like past life extruding on a present memory, or did we emotionally feel some event that had happened in the house that we were, because we were really in a state of being susceptible because of like, you know, like 2-3 beers, you're not blotto, but you're just kind of like, and then trying to clear your mind. And we just got, and it just, I never had another weird experience in that house. I lived in that house for 2 years. But it was also like, we're not going to go have any more seances in the attic. We did try to tunnel through one of the walls in the basement, but that was for different reasons.
That sounds exciting.
The house was supposedly part of the Underground Railroad, but in this case, literally linked to a couple houses on the street, like right next to each other. So we were going around in the basement, sounding on the walls with hammers, and found a hollow wall and drove a piece of rebar through it.
Cool.
But we were like, let's go get some pickaxes. And then somebody's like, does anybody engineering major, anybody know if this is like, this can't be load bearing because it's hollow, right? I'm like, yeah, but it's like 150 years old. I don't know.
Right, you're like all art history majors, like
yeah, it's just like I'm like, exactly. It's like, I am a studio art major and a history minor. I don't know if this, like, taking down this wall is going to be like real bad in the explaining to like the dean why the house is partially caved in. But yeah, that was my major one. And other than that, that's kind of I've never had a sighting of anything. No, unfortunately for me, no visual, because that's my primary, and it's my field of study, my field of practice, my field that I'm working on, you know, research and hypotheses now, but no, I haven't seen anything yet.
Yeah, same. I think we just wanted it too bad.
I wanted it so bad when I was a little kid.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That, like, but that's I also think, though, to some extent, like, I don't know. I was started reading Trickster and the Paranormal, which is excellent. I read about the first section through that, and they're talking about like sensitivity of people and kind of the people that embody the Mercury archetype to higher degrees, as defined. Like, he defines it in this book. Here's your checklist for finding out if you're a Mercury person or not. Are the people that's running into that? And I'm like, I don't know, maybe I'm more of a Hephaestus guy and I'm not getting that. I don't know what's going on there. Vallee and those guys, the surrealist Mercury people. Lots of trickster properties. Sorry, Leah.
Yeah, so you mentioned earlier in the conversation about basically being a true believer, right? Like believing the paranormal, believing everything around these subjects, ufology, etc. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about just your own experience in this cycle of belief. and how your views on this subject have changed and evolved over time.
I think from being a kid and reading your Berlitz Bermuda Triangle stuff, being really afraid of the Bermuda Triangle, believing in ghosts, reading a lot of books on ghosts, probably being too young to read Communion and to read Mac, and when the X-Files was happening, really being like afraid of being abducted by aliens when I was like a teenager. I think I will say this is like a dig on disclosure a little bit, but like people don't remember, we were gonna have disclosure in the late 90s. Like all of that stuff, they were prepping us psychologically to accept the reality they were about to unveil, and then it didn't happen. Yep. And I think I lost interest for a chunk of it in that, and there's part of me that I don't think it's going to ever matter cosmically to a species like us like that, but I think it does matter for plumbing those mysteries. I think for a lot of people, I think what changed over the years is there are a lot of people that are, like I said, telling stories that don't conform to kind of the stereotypical groups of things, making me question what the driving force is. I'm not sure about the, I feel like everything now people talk about the phenomena, but it makes it feel like it's like a jar of peanut butter. And I'm not sure if feel like it's more of a jar of peanut butter or an undiscovered ecosystem. I kind of have now, I'm more open to the possibilities of different hypotheses, different ideas on what's happening than I am. I'm not committed to one like chunk of hypotheses. I do say to people a lot that I kind of believe, though, in the if you were to take every type of encounter and put it on a pie chart, I would say yes. Like I'm not going to tell you an extraterrestrial biological entity has never visited this planet and like grabbed a potato in somebody's dog. It could have happened. I know on a lot of ghost people right now are like, they're not spirits of the dead. They're some kind of like time-based holography or something, or everybody. It's like, I feel though, like part of this too, though, it's like everybody won't learn the word liminal. And now it's like, it reminds me of like when an adjective reaches supersaturation in advertising land, and you hit something where like people, like when the iMac was new, remember the bubblegum iMacs, and then there were just prefixes on everything for the purpose of marketing, or HD, like HD sunglasses, and I'm like, well, unless you have like a different eye structure, HD for all, this is it. I do feel things get that way a little bit. Like I feel like everything is it's like lots of talk about tulpas and egregores, which I'm like, yes, but not everything. Not everything is everything. I'm not sure. This is just gut level. I feel like that was my one gut pause with Meeting the Absurd, where it's like it's still peanut butter a little bit, but that's just
right. Everything's the same thing.
It might be peanut butter. I'm just not ready to accept peanut butter yet.
Right. Yeah, and it also feels like it falls kind of prey to the same issues as like a perennialist view, where it basically glosses over any of the rich or complex elements of the mental model in order to make them all the same things.
It does, and it also, I think for Catstrup, I'm like, what if we're the demonic reality of the mycelium colony under Michigan, and we just don't know it.
That would be cool.
I think though, my at the same time, I don't want to dismiss. I'm not dismissive, and this is, I know everybody knows, like the sample from The Haunting from Rob Zombie's Supercharger Heaven. Look, I know the supernatural isn't supposed to happen, but it does happen. That's why I think it's still worth pursuing, because it keeps happening. People keep seeing these things, whether they're beings or archetypes. It's like, we've never been rid of the hairy man. We've never been rid of the lights in the sky. We've never been rid of the presence, the shadow, the specter, you know. So
who's your favorite UFO bullshit artist?
Bob Lazar, 100%. I have some like weird, like, I have like, will always have like a weird nascent, like I did like a really early like school design project of the illustration of the S4 saucer. I bought, when I found that Bob was like still around and you could buy stuff from his website, like I bought his S4 like saucer print. It was like signed for like $30, and
incredible.
And I got a spiral, like one of those things it's a toy, but you can watch atoms splitting in it. He sells those. Bob just lived, I have printouts. Again, picture like very young me trying to write this research paper, printing out Glenn Campbell's Groom Lake Desert Rat. And I still have like a sheaf of black and white LaserJet printouts of that whole thing. That whole mythos just lived in my head for such a long time that I have some like weird affection for it. So he is my favorite UFO bullshitter.
If anyone's interested in those and all that Desert Rat stuff, that is on the Archives for the Unexplained. All saved on there, so you can print it out too. It'd be just Jay.
Glenn and I were mutuals on Twitter for a long time. He used to be on there, but I think he got sick of my shit, as it happens over time.
Just the Twitter feed not safe for work anymore.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but and my favorite guy that no one reads that everybody should check out is Scott Rago. He wrote like 30 books. He was murdered under mysterious circumstances, although I think it was just crime, but it kind of adds that. What did he know?
Oh, yeah.
And some of his stuff is still in print. Some of it is not. That I'm kind of like, if anybody has an inexpensive copy of ESPN Your Pet that you'd be willing to let go, you can find me on Twitter.
Incredible.
Like,
seriously?
Yeah, seriously. So he has a lot of good stuff to say, and I think that one of the things, though, I think one of the things that's a core for me, and this is again where I had a little bit of trouble with Kastrup, is we're not it. Like, even if it's just us, and I think there was a part of me that was reading that and got a little bit depressed, because I'm like, well, if this is all us, I'm like, it can't all be us. It has to be the demiurge. But it made me, it's like, if I buy Kastrup, I might inadvertently become a Gnostic. I feel like it's sort of
it's a slippery slope.
It is. I feel like it is. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I'd love to ask you your thoughts about, considering your knowledge of advertising, the role of art and creativity in the realm of influence, or even the weaponization of spirituality. I'm thinking of Emperor Constantine talking about seeing the cross in the sky, using that as a battle cry for his troops. Obviously they used all varieties of supernatural phenomena like bird reading and stuff like that. In the modern day, you mentioned Bernays earlier. World War I social scientist, propagandist, and then after the war, he went into the commercial industry and became the pioneer of developing the advertising campaigns related to getting women to begin smoking cigarettes. So, you know, and that subject's close to me, World War I propaganda. My great-grandfather was a visual artist who then became, he did backgrounds for plays, and then he started doing propaganda in World War I. You know, so you as an artist, sort of, you know, it's essential to make money. I have my uncle, a visual artist. He worked in advertising as well. How do you sort of process that experience of like the role of influence, where an artist is so intimately connected to producing an intended effect in the audience? How do you sort of process that experience of applying such a beautiful thing into sort of a monetization process, you know, with no negative judgment or whatsoever? I'm just very curious about that experience itself.
I have, I have 2 or 3 ways to look at it. The first thing I will say is I am fascinated by the mechanics of it. I'm fascinated by the craft. I'm fascinated about learning what works and what doesn't. I'm fascinated, you know, learning about using visuals in applied psychology for influence on people. The second thing I'll say, I've never done, I've never worked for anybody that crappy. I feel like I have a pretty clean conscience when I can go to bed tonight saying I've never tried to convince anybody to do anything that I would say is generally destructive. Like, I've never worked on any kind of beauty products. I've never worked in politics. I've done a lot of industrials. So some of that stuff can get a touch. I've done a couple things that were gross that relate to the oil and gas industry. But then I also did free work for 350.org for their anti-fracking campaigns. Try to balance the scales a little bit. Generally speaking, I'm also, for the last couple years, went in-house somewhere where I'm not doing anything odious. So I think it's up to us as individual practitioners to not succumb to like love of money to the point where we're working for the bad guys. I also, for a long time though, I think my issue that I have to resolve is that, other than the stuff I know I have a personal weakness to buy, because there are triggers there. I actually think this stuff is, I don't know how to say this exactly. I think it's incumbent upon all of us as individuals to cultivate a robust personal identity that, for lack of a better way to put it, can take a punch. My psyche needs to be able to stand up to advertising, but it also needs to be able to stand up to my fellow person. And, we have now, I feel like, advertising is less insidious than viral ideas that are propagated. Like, like everybody can do a psyop now. And I feel like more destruction is being rained down on that front than there is through trying to get people to like purchase the cosmetic or something. Not that all that stuff is great, but I don't, ideally it's a thing, but nobody's going to do it. Nobody's going to work on themselves, and nobody's going to say no to the money. And I'm trying to, so there's just like somewhat, since I'm not indifferent to the effects I can have on others, at least I'm not trying to get you to do anything bad.
Jay, I love what you're saying. It reminds me a lot of this idea of psychosecurity, that basically personalities become downstream artifacts of these algorithmic marketing systems on different platforms. and that, you know, the personality that originally engages with these systems like Facebook or Twitter kind of dictates the terms of that engagement. But over time, the human personality basically just becomes the output of those systems, you know, based on recommendation engines or memes or viral content or targeted advertising. And it feels like at this point, it's woven into the fabric of the technology and communication tools that we use. I can't think of, excepting maybe direct phone calls, I can't think of, I mean, actually including phone calls, I can't think of any communication medium that we have between people that isn't basically totally overburdened by capitalist debris. Whether it's marketing or advertising or junk mail or spam phone calls. Like the only time I answer my phone is if I schedule a phone call with a friend. Otherwise, it's garbage. It feels like it's all just become marketing systems. And I say this, by the way, as someone who works in algorithmic marketing and as a marketing science professional.
It's difficult to manage. I think I think we were less susceptible pre-internet. I think I feel like the issues that I have are that, I hate to say this, but just from an evolutionary standpoint, we're quicker to fear and anger because those would protect us from a charging saber-toothed tiger. And those are easier emotions to elicit than joy. I also feel like because of that, the way our entire media landscape is now gamified for it. You know, it's gamified, and it's the best way to get attention is to make somebody angry to get the click. It's a little weird to me because I feel like somehow the whole ecosystem is false, but we're all locked into it because that's just driving the economy now. I don't think things with when I'm working and doing something, I'm doing a lot of integrated campaigns. So there's still some print, there's TV, there's radio, there's digital, and the digital is the thing. Everybody glommed onto digital because digital gives the feedback, but the digital feedback is also what the system is reporting, and it's a little bit. I'm going to tell you, old vets, Leah Prime is Leah Prime. I just saw that one. Somebody wanted to know who you were, but
everybody wants to know who I am.
Everybody, I feel like the reporting systems are a lot like the EMF meter, where it's like, look, the lights are going off, but what does that mean?
What does that actually mean?
What does that mean? And it's like, I don't know, the light, we want the light to go off though. So we're done. We're going home. But I feel like to a large extent, that developing that, like, I like that term psychosecurity. That's like, but that's like getting exercise too. Not everybody's doing that. You know, I think some of that, like when people talk, like I said, when people talk about Aquino, they think of like Cobra Troopers beaming stuff into your brain, and it's actually much easier than that.
Right. You don't actually need the whiz bang, super sophisticated smoke and mirrors stuff. Not at all.
And I read, have you read George Lakoff?
No, I haven't.
Okay, Lakoff's great. Lakoff.
What do you recommend by him? I've been keeping a list of everything you're recommending.
The Political Mind. Lakoff talks a lot about how this is related to neurobiology and how we end up those downstream artifacts become our actual core identity. That's when your core identity is threatened, even on that psychological level, you actually are reacting as though I was like somebody was chasing you around with an axe.
Right.
Which is why you can't. Yeah. But it's like, so now your entire core identity that you'll fight as a means of survival for is based on those downstream artifacts.
Sounds like UFO people.
Advertising and hate clicks. The UFO people, well, I also feel like we have hit a weird point in the 20th century, because when you're studying these art movements, this is like the disillusion of all of these things, Dada, Surrealism, all the goals, all of this comes out of the disillusion of the failure of institutions to keep us out of 2 world wars.
Yep.
And I feel like we gave up a lot of crappy systems that were supposed to tell us who we were and what we were supposed to do, but we didn't replace them with anything really good either. And we're just kind of floating. So some of us turn out okay. Some of us join a cult. Like some of us get into MLM. Like it's just a real, it's like
Kekistan, Pepe the Frog. Yeah.
There's a lot of bad stuff out there, but I'm not going to say you can cure it, but I feel like any kind of deliberate conscious thought where I'm saying like go to the museum and don't just perceive visually, perceive consciously. It's help. It's just it's not going to cure you, but it's getting off the couch, going for a walk. Metaphorically, it's a little exercise for you.
When Brian Sentes was on a little while ago now, he talked about a process that can happen in belief or faith-based communities, or even just any marginalized community, really, where if the community is being ostracized and villainized and sort of threatened, the beliefs sort of cohere increasingly towards a central theme. And he talked a little bit about how that might have been influential in the change from pantheism to monotheism. Have you, in your experience with the supernatural community and things like that, what has been your take on this sort of process where it seemed in some ways like all of it has merged together in the last 60 years? We've touched on it very briefly, the Vallee style and things like that. I was just wondering. I'm sorry. Yeah. Please go. Speak
I think that. I actually think though. I think that ties into Jung's basic concept of synchronicity. And I think that one thing I have experienced, which I don't necessarily call this a supernatural event, but as you pursue this stuff, synchronicity does occur. And I found that in really funny ways, and it's sort of things that are anecdotal, but like frankly, I feel like right now, these ideas I've had have been percolating for a long time, but I bought a bunch of books without. It's not like I'm buying these books for research. I'm just like I'm buying books because I'm buying books, and then I'm reading through them, and I'm like, here's this connection of. I got theosophy, I got my telepathy, I got my circles, my squares, my triangles. Like there's these interconnected data points, and it becomes personally meaningful because basically it's like this. It's mashed potatoes in Close Encounters. You're like, this means something, and I think. As people have been talking more too, I think just a lot of it is these communities don't talk. Like the Bigfoot people aren't like, let's go to the thing with the witches. Like, let's go, or like, let's go hang out with the UFO people. I think there's more cross-pollination. And as a result of that, there's data shared. There's people are seeing similarities, but also the synchronicities are increasing. And that's sort of, I hope, it's like I said, not peanut butter, a hidden ecology, but I think that's what's happening with that. But again, I think everybody's, we're all seekers. Some people get derailed, unfortunately. Some people are in a really good place, and I talk to people that have really good models for how they view this stuff. Again, I call out the Liminal Earth crew. They have they have interesting ways of looking at things that I think are positive and will yield interesting results as long as they keep pursuing them. I also saw big thing on a Starseed conference on the timeline earlier, which is really unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
You know, is that stuff gets turned into an alt-right gateway because people are seeking some meaning. I also think with this stuff now, though, we're in like another, we've had like 20 years of really unprecedented system failure, which I think is why, you know, witchcraft is becoming popular. It's like, rather than invoke the intercession of this deity, I'll do it myself. You know, like,
what's more American than that,
right? Or going back to the pantheistic gods, I'll go with a transactional deity because that's something I can relate to.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. So Jay, we are coming up at the top of the hour.
I know.
This was amazing. This is a great conversation.
Thank you.
Love everything we covered. I have a book list a mile long, which
this is one of my favorites.
Leaves me delighted.
Oh,
yeah, this is amazing.
Thank you.
We'd love to have you back anytime.
Sure.
And I want to stay in touch with you. I want to look more into the EVP or the EMF origins a bit more.
Okay. Yeah.
I'll show what I find with you.
Yeah. If I when I buy those papers, I'll let you know if there's anything in there.
So go ahead.
Incredible. So before we boot you off the stream, where can people find you?
Find me on Twitter. I am at Synoisia on Twitter. That is a ill-fated electronic music project that was started like 10 years ago, never finished, but the handle stuck. And I will occasionally tweet out links to my blog, which is going very slowly, which is synoisia.blogspot.com.
Sweet.
Beautiful. Jay, thanks again so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much. Everybody take care. Avoid the death cloud.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We're trying. Take care. All right, gentlemen.
That was a good one.
That was a great one. That was a lot of fun. Dude, it's so funny. I had to keep myself on mute because I was cracking up the whole time.
Yeah, I really like these more like kind of academic style conversations, touching on so many more broad subjects.
Yeah, me too. Me too. All right, gentlemen, let's round table. What do people have going on?
Nothing, man. Just working.
Yeah, UFO world is slow these days, right, Leo? Like,
well,
there's nothing happening.
Balloon shit's going on.
Well, I guess
hyped up about that for some reason. But yeah, it's hard.
Disclosure's coming soon.
Yeah, always. Right. Well, wake me up.
All right. So before we part ways, next week we are bringing on Jeff from Strange Recon to talk through military Black Ops technology in the UFO community. Cool. After that, on March 1st, we'll be welcoming Marco Visconti onto the stream. He's a European guest, so we'll be doing a different time. We'll probably be doing 3 p.m. Eastern on March 1st, and he'll be talking about occultism, anti-fascism, magic, and Western esoteric traditions. And then just coming down the pike, after that, we'll be looking at an Open Lines episode. So we have some great stuff coming up. Yeah. Does anyone have any parting words before we hop off for the evening?
Cowabunga.
Nice. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, cowabunga. I like that one.
Nice.
Well, good night. I'll be the sweet, nice person. Everybody stay safe out there. We love you. Thanks for tuning in. And we will see you next Wednesday at 9 p.m.
Isn't that what cowabunga means?
It's shorthand.
Yeah.
Bye.